Welcome to the Curiosity Catalyst podcast. My name is Mitch South. So good to have you here. The purpose of this podcast is to be curious. Curiosity is the key that opens up the doors to possibility, which will open up a world of endless learning and discovery. Thank you guys so much for listening. Let's get into this episode. What's up, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in. This episode is episode number 4, so I'm excited to be here. I apologize first and foremost if there's any noises or anything going on. There's a super annoying cricket that won't stop, and also my landlord is doing some yard work, but I don't think it'll be too bad. So this week I wanted to start out with the quote of the week, and it's from Winston Churchill. And it goes, "Continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential." The reason I picked that quote this week had to do with a movie I watched. And I watched the movie because I'm reading a book right now. So I'll get into that in just a second. But the book that I'm reading right now is The Brothers Karamazov. And it is by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and he was a Russian author. The Brothers Karamazov is one of the most famous books that's ever been written. It's just a little bit lesser known in our time because it was written in the 1800s. But Dostoevsky was a mastermind. He was so good at creating a world where people were exploring different thoughts, and it's kind of dark. It's a lot harder to read than just your normal book, and I couldn't even possibly try to do it in Russian, even though I think I can speak Russian. When I read that book, I feel like I'm reading Chinese. So it's fun though. The book it kind of explores the conflict between faith and doubt, the problem of free will, and also moral responsibility. The book is a murder mystery, which is why I ended up watching this movie, but it's a murder mystery with 3 brothers, Dmitry, Ivan, and Alyosha. And these 3 brothers are really different, each of them. Alyosha is for a long time he worked under a batyushka, which they call him like a father, right? Like a pastor. And he is just a good person. He's not the most intellectually bright. He's not the smartest person ever. And yet, out of the 3 brothers, he without a doubt is the best person out of all of them. People love him the most. He's the most loving. And he gives people the benefit of the doubt always. And he never tells a lie. He's always honest. It's amazing to watch the 3. Ivan is the smartest, and yet he, out of the 3, has the biggest issue with morality, which is really interesting. And Dmitry, who is really bright and really smart, he has a problem as well, and he has a problem really just kind of controlling. He doesn't have a very good sense of discipline. And so it's just their struggles with their father, and it ends up into a murder mystery, which is really interesting. I'm at the very end of the book. I don't even know how it ends yet. But the reason that this book encouraged me to go watch a movie was I was looking up a list of the top movies that have been made, and one of them caught my eye, and it was 12 Angry Men. Now, if any of you guys haven't seen that movie before, it is a 1957 black and white film, and the main actor is Harry Fonda. And it's really kind of a fun show, or fun movie. My wife always teases me because I always say shows for movies and movies for shows. I don't know why I mix them up. But anyways, so with this, the the whole movie is about a jury. And this jury is made up of 12 men, so 12 angry men. And out of the men, there are just a total range of personalities, of different ideas, and it's really interesting. And the purpose of the movie isn't just to watch these men figure out how to do the case. It really is kind of to show how important it is to have a jury, and it focuses on how important life is, and that we need to take these things seriously, and how fortunate we are to have a legal system like the one that we do. In other places, they don't have some of those things that aren't as corrupt as others. So it was really cool to kind of watch that. But the piece that when I watched it this time, I saw a little bit different of a lesson than I did the previous time. And what it had to do with was the perspectives of the men. So out of these 12 jurors, I kind of wanted to go through a few of them just to give you a little bit of a background if you haven't seen the movie. But what happens is when the beginning of the movie starts, all of the jurors come into the room. You don't know anything about the 18-year-old boy, except for that he's being accused of murdering his father with a knife. You don't know any of the evidence. You find that out as the jurors talk about it. But you don't know any of the evidence. But every single one of the jurors, except for one, is convinced, absolutely convinced, that the boy killed his father. And it's really interesting. So I wanted to kind of go through each one really quick. So juror number 1, he is the leader of the group, and he is kind of a baseball fanatic. He's a coach, and he really likes it, but he doesn't really lean one way or the other. He just thinks he's guilty. Juror number 2 is really shy, almost kind of gives off a nerd vibe, where he has low self-esteem, he's afraid to speak up, and he kind of gets bullied around a little bit. Juror number 3 is really rude, and he's very abrasive. He yells a lot, he isn't afraid of telling people what he thinks, and really he just is kind of a bulldog. The juror number 4 is very logical, very smart, and very evidence-based. He tries to make all of his conclusions based off of what he knows, and he's very stubborn in his ways. But he's extremely logical, and he's not closed to seeing other ways and other evidence. Number 5 is similar to the convict. He was born in the slums. This 18-year-old that killed his father was born in the slums, and he kind of connects with him in that way. Number 6 is like a construction worker. He's just a hard worker, just a normal guy. Number 7 is he's another baseball fanatic, and all he wants to do is he just wants to get through the case because the baseball game is on later that night. Juror number 8 is the one that he's the only one that thinks it's not guilty. And he is kind of all about faith and just believing in the process. Number 9, he's this old guy. He's very observant, extremely observant actually, and he's really smart, and he doesn't let on to the fact that he's really, really bright, and all the other guys, they kind of doubt him for a little while. Number 10 is a really old, prejudiced man. Number 11 is an immigrant, and number 12 is just a marketer who is only thinking about business mostly. So these men, as they go around, they have a hard time looking and understanding why someone can be not guilty until they start talking about it, and they talk about it for a long time, and it really frustrates a lot of them. Now, out of all of the 12 jury members, which one do you think changed the least out of the experience? Now, you would think, oh, well, maybe it's the marketer who's focusing on business. But it wasn't. because he was kind of involved in the case. He was listening the whole time, and he was paying attention. He wasn't really getting involved, but he didn't do much other than that. You might think, oh, well, maybe it's the old guy because he just thinks that he knows a lot. No, in fact, that guy was really observant. He was super duper good at pointing out things, and he really let the case kind of go through him. He changed a lot from this experience. And what I realized at the very end of the movie was their very last scene, actually. The jurors are exiting the courtroom, and as the jurors are exiting the courtroom, one juror, he's out of there faster than everybody else. And during the entire discussion on whether he was guilty or not guilty, that same juror the whole time didn't really care about whether he voted guilty or not guilty. He just wanted it to be over with. And that was juror number 7. I called him the apathetic man, where he didn't really care whether he was guilty or not guilty. He just wanted to go do what he wanted to do. And so he let this amazing experience of discussion, of morality, of the value of human life, of the justice system, pass by him. He didn't even notice all of these lessons that everybody else was learning. Every single other person, I was able to kind of identify what thing they kind of learned. It was really, some of the most evident ones were number 2, the guy who was really shy and had low self-esteem. By the end, he was willing to stick up for what he believed in. He spoke up, and he really used his brain, because he was a smart guy, and he used his brain to show, hey, look, how could that kid have stabbed the father in this certain way, which nobody else saw, which was really cool. So he changed in that way. The guy that was really, really rude and very abrasive, by the end, he's broken. The case went completely through him because he was so passionate and because he was so into the case. Number 10, the very angry old prejudiced man, by the end, he was broken as well because he didn't realize how prejudiced he was against people who were in the slums. It was really interesting. As the time goes on, when he at one moment he stands up and he just starts defiling this poor boy, and he starts saying that, oh, he's from the slums and he doesn't even deserve a case. He's guilty. All of those guys lie. All they do, all the people from the slums lie, and they don't do anything good, and so he needs to be found guilty. And at that point in the movie, everybody is so sick and fed up with his prejudice that they know he's being prejudiced. He's not looking at any of the evidence, and so all of them stand up and turn away from him. And it's really cool to watch that scene because it kind of just breaks his mind. He didn't realize how prejudiced he had been and how nobody else saw the same way as him. Now, the one that I wanted to focus on, going back a little bit, is the apathetic man. During the trial, the whole time he's saying that the kid's guilty. He says, he's guilty. We just need to get out of here. I got this baseball game at 7. Man, you got to let me out of here. Why, what are we talking about? The evidence is there. He's not looking at any of the evidence. He just wants to get out of there. And he keeps talking about it over and over and over. And he's pretty abrasive about it. He really just wants to get out of there. And at the very last scene, like I referenced earlier, the first one out of the courtroom was juror number 7. And I realized that every single man in that courtroom, in the discussion, all of the jurors had the exact same experience. All of them went through and looked at the evidence. They looked at the trial, and each one of them changed in different ways because they were putting in effort, because they were putting in, they were trying to put in, they were paying attention and they were being involved. It's like, and so the way I wanted to transition with this is, if you don't pay attention and you're not involved, there's so many experiences in your life that you're going to miss. There's so many opportunities to grow and change that you will just let them pass by you just because you think that there's nothing to learn, that you have something else to get to. There's a quote from Nietzsche, and it said, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die, as well as the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions. They cease to be mind." It's a really deep thought. That it's true. If a snake cannot cast its skin, then it will die. And if we are not able to change our minds, I'll go farther than Nietzsche, and I'll say that if we don't continuously improve, then we cease to live but are only existing. I had a companion once in Ukraine when I was over there, and it was so interesting because when he came, I won't give a ton of background around him just to, I don't think he'll ever probably see this, but he had a hard life, a really hard life. But when he came to Ukraine, he struggled unbelievably with the language, like to the point where he never learned it. And he eventually had to go home. And the thing that I noticed that was really frustrating was when I was trying to teach him and help him and teach him all the things that I wish that I had known and that I had seen, when I looked at him, he completely could not listen to a thing that I said. He thought that he could figure it out himself, and he was a little bit prideful in the fact that he had a hard time listening to anybody who he thought didn't know more than him, and at the time I was a lot younger than him. I was only 18. But when I look at that experience, it kind of made me think about how I used that. And when I got to the mission, I was kind of a little bit of a nut job in just my focus and determination. I went from before pre-mission to of just being really lackadaisical. I didn't really care about learning that much, to effort level 100. I could not try any harder than I did. And I remember sitting in a meeting and I'm listening to everybody speak Russian, and I still remember the face of this guy as I was just staring at his lips and trying to understand what he said for 3 hours. The meeting was 3 hours, and it was at church, and as I was staring at him, I just was sick because I couldn't understand a thing that he said. The only word that I could understand when I got there was spasiba, and which is thank you. That's it. That's the only thing I could understand, and it was so frustrating. It was unbelievable because I put in so much effort, and I couldn't see how it was getting better. And for months, and I'm not exaggerating, for months, I would stare at them, especially on Sunday in church. When I would stare at them, I would just have a headache. It would be 3 hours of understanding literally almost nothing. And I realized that my companion, when we would have lessons, when we would have church, when we would do these different things, he would kind of drift off. His brain would just go into Neverland. And as we would have a lesson, as we would have meetings, as we would do these different things, when we would start speaking Russian, he completely would just tune out. And he wouldn't listen. He didn't really put any effort into trying to understand the language. And he never ended up learning it. And I think that that's really important to note because there's so many things and so many opportunities in our lives that we don't realize are opportunities. They're opportunities to grow. Now, when I was researching for this topic, I found something called the paradox of effort. And the paradox is that life often becomes easiest when it's the hardest. And what I got from that was that a lot of times we have to do something that's hard to get something that's worth it or that's valuable. And it's hard because when we do these things, we have to do them a lot of times. It's a little tiny steps. We all hear that. And it's hard to actually do it, though, to really be consistent. One of my favorite quotes ever is from Denzel Washington. And I just want to use the consistency part because I almost want to go back and use this quote again, but which I probably will. But the quote goes, "Dreams without plans are just dreams and ultimately fuel disappointment. On the road to achieving your dreams, you must first apply commitment and then consistency. Because without commitment, you'll never start. And without consistency, you'll never finish." And I think that this is completely overlooked by most people. I think consistency is by far one of the most important things you can do, especially with effort. And so if I could sum up this entire podcast, it would just be pay attention. Really seek to change and seek to change your opinion. Seek to change your thoughts, improve your thoughts, and continue to grow. Don't think that you are stuck where you are because you know too much. That's prideful. Or because you're not good enough. Because honestly, you are. Your efforts are worth something, and they will bring amazing things, better things than you can ever imagine. That's why we hear so many upset stories, right? Why we have so many underdogs that beat the Goliath. It's because they are achieving their potential, right? I was thinking about it and I thought, in that quote from Winston Churchill, I'll read it again, but it says, "Continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential." If you think about it, strength and intelligence can increase our potential, right? So that's not something that should be, I think, completely washed away with and thinking that has nothing to do with potential, because I think it does. I think it deals with the magnitude of potential. But your effort is the only thing that will allow you to achieve that potential. If you don't try, if you don't have any effort, then you can't get any better, and you can't achieve that full potential. Which is why you see some of these underdogs achieve amazing, great things where they beat the Goliath, because they achieved their potential, and their potential was higher than the other person's effort, right? Or than their strength or intelligence, their magnitude of their potential, right? So I think that I didn't put that very well, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. So anyways, thanks so much for tuning in with this podcast. This week was a little bit harder to come up with something, but I just had that thought keep coming back in my head. I loved that movie. I thought it was really interesting. And there were a lot of lessons that I learned from it that taught me a lot of things. Look at things from different perspectives. Look at how you can change from situations. And I think that we can do this with everything in our life. It's been really interesting preparing for these podcasts, because as I'm preparing for them, I'm seeing things in the world that I didn't see before. And it's just because I'm applying effort and trying to pay attention to what's going on. So just to finish up, I just wanted to tell you, thanks so much for tuning in. Just remember, curiosity is the key that unlocks the door to possibility. So stay curious, guys. We'll see you next week.